Good afternoon or good morning to everyone, depending from where you're joining us. My name's Jandel Crutchfield. I'll be giving you just a brief background for today's webinar and some housekeeping before turning it over to our moderator for the webinar today. And so I'm being in my fourth year as an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Arlington School of Social Work. And here I engage in research on moving the helping professions towards racial justice in sectors including education, health, and economics. And so on behalf of the 13th Grand Challenge of Social Work, the National Steering Committee, I'm excited to say welcome to our guests who are joining us on Zoom as well as on YouTube. So today's webinar is the second part of a 7-part series dedicated to the 13th Social Work Grand Challenge, Eliminate Racism. Because this is the newest of the grand challenges with the focus on the urgent crisis of racism in society, the National Webinar Working Group has organized a series. And we're trying to highlight why eliminating racism should be a lens from which to view each of the other 12 social work grand challenges. And so we had our series launch that I think went well just 2 weeks ago with our esteemed speaker, Dr. Patricia Reed Merritt. And she gave us a strong charge to continue this work no matter the challenges that lie ahead. And so sharing with you from the Social Work Grand Challenges website, the Grand Challenge to Eliminate Racism is crucial because the United States is built on a legacy of racism and white supremacy that's consistently and significantly impacted the daily lives of millions of people. Today, racist policies, bias, discriminatory practices continue to promote and facilitate racial inequality in myriad ways. So social work has provided considerable leadership in the civil rights and race equity movements, but we as a profession have much more work to do internally to our profession and through society as a whole. So in today's webinar, we will address 2 of the 13 grand challenges that help move us towards a just society. And so those 2 challenges are promote smart decarceration and achieve equal opportunity and justice. And so we're excited today because we actually get to hear from experts on the ground as they are working to try to eliminate racism in these 2 areas of our social work grand challenges. And so we hope that today you get a snapshot of some tangible examples of how we can try to eliminate racism in these 2 areas. So as I've asked in the last webinar, I'll ask our audience to first commit to listening and then engaging with one another today for what we hope to be an instructive session. So that's our welcome. And so I want to just move into a few housekeeping things to make sure we have our best experience. We have 2 audiences, remember, on Zoom and YouTube. So we'll try to engage both during the webinar. If you're attending on Zoom, you can communicate and interact in the chat box. You don't have the ability to speak or go on camera, but you can send your comments through the chat. And if you have these burning questions of our panelists, which you may, you want to make sure that you're using the Q&A feature, which you should see at in the control bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And so we'll have a chance for question and answer after our panelists share today. YouTube attendees, of course, you can enter questions and thoughts in the comment section under the live video, and we'll be monitoring those as well. And so lastly, for housekeeping, the National Association of Social Workers has offered CEUs for this event. And so those interested in earning them will need to complete a form, and the link will be posted in the chat on Zoom and YouTube at the end of the webinar. So that is it for our housekeeping, and I am happy to pass the torch to one of our fantastic members of the webinar working group, Dr. Joanne Lunsford, and she'll introduce herself and talk more about the webinar today. Dr. Lunsford.
Thank you, Dr. Crutchfield. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today, whether you're on Zoom or whether you're in the YouTube world. So it's so exciting to have this webinar today because, as Dr. Crutchfield said, and many of you already know, that it's so important when we're talking about eliminating racism in society. It's it's such an integral part of every part of the fabric of our society. And for us to have some people here who are not only not acknowledging that, but actually doing the work to try and unweave that in our society and do the work, it's so phenomenal. It's so exciting. And so that's the purpose of today's webinar, to bring that up to you, to bring that to everyone's attention. And so today I know we have an hour to try and get it all in, and there's so much to do and there's so much to say that we're going to make this quick so that you get more from them than us. And so today we have some esteemed panelists. We have Dr. Kenneth Wilson. We have Mr. Kenneth Wilson, who is the county administrator for Franklin, Ohio. So he is the highest appointed person in the Franklin County that is in a non-elected position. So having his expertise from all the things that are going on in Franklin County that are derived and specifically geared to eliminating racism is beyond wonderful. We'll also have Judge Monica Hawkins from the Franklin County Common Pleas Court Domestic and Juvenile Division joining us shortly. She's in the middle of finishing up courtroom things that are going on, but we are so honored she'll be able to pop in and pop back out because she has to get back to the bench and administer justice in her courtroom. We also have Ms. Crystal Martin, who is the specialty docket manager in Franklin County Municipal Court. And so some people call them specialty dockets, some people call them accountability courts. There's so many different terms that are used throughout the nation. But basically, they're the courts that are like the drug courts, the mental health court. And I know she does the mental health court, drug court, opiate court, veterans court, human trafficking court, and mental health court. I think I said them all. But there's so many courts that she's doing that she's the manager of, and she's going to share a little bit about that with us today. And then we have Roger Wilson, who has 30 plus years in the field of corrections in so many capacities, whether it's community corrections or institutional corrections. And he is the chair of the National Association of Blacks in Criminal Justice, better known as NABJA, Ohio Chapter, Columbus affiliate. So he actually leads many people that are in the policing field, court field, as well as institutional corrections and community corrections. And we also have Ms. Felicia Hayes, who comes with a variety of experience, but she's also talking a little bit about the intersectionality between education and criminal justice. How do those interact, and what kind of impact do they have on us achieving equal opportunity and justice for all? So I welcome you all. I thank you for your time. And if you don't mind, we can get started if you guys are ready. Okay, so we'll start with County Administrator Wilson. Thank you so much for taking time out of your conference right now. I know you are representing Franklin County well right now at a national conference for county administrators. And we thank you for your service, and we thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time today. So basically, I just want to say that Franklin County has done a lot of things when it comes to attempting to eliminate racism, and they actually have done things that talk about the influence of racism on poverty and how that impacts equal opportunity and justice for many. So I don't know if you could maybe take some time with us and maybe tell us a little bit about some of the county's efforts on race and racism that have been instituted, thought about, some things that you're doing that maybe other counties that are thinking about, how do we play a better role in this, that they can understand some of the things that might be going on and have effective impact in their own counties.
Thank you so much for having me this afternoon and being able to be a part of this panel. Yes, Franklin County has been doing this work for a number of years. Our focus sharpened dating back to 2018 when we started the work that led to the Rise Together blueprint to reduce poverty in Franklin County. We went into that, wanted to be not a report, but a plan. And it turned into the people's plan because we had a extreme amount of community engagement. And one thing that came out of that work loud and clear was that structural racism was a factor that you could not dodge when you talk about economic inequities, generational cyclical poverty. So as a county, that report guides us by having 13 goals and 120 action steps, but doing what we can to eliminate racism is one of the top priorities for Franklin County. And we've had all of our directors go through racial equity training, and we intend to ingrain that into the DNA of the organization. For example, we've established a racial equity council that's made up of 29 employees, both non-bargaining and labor members, to look at being an employee in Franklin County and not just being able to assimilate and survive. We want people of all diverse backgrounds to be able to thrive. So this group is charged with creating a work atmosphere that will allow for that and account for that. We've also, through the guidance of the board, in May of 2020, declared racism as a public health crisis. And they were intentional and made it to be more than just a declaration, but had it tied to 10 tangible actions that were deep and broad in their scope. And one of the examples is, for the first time, we worked in concert with Franklin County Public Health and established a position through the support of the county within our Franklin County Public Health, the Associate Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and looking at health and public health with a racial equity lens. As you all know, life expectancy and other health disparities have been nothing new to Franklin County or anywhere else around the country. But COVID-19 magnified those disparities. So as we move even beyond this pandemic, it is our intention to continue that work in dealing with the social determinants of health and the issues around race and discrimination and all of those things. Also in November of last year, the commissioners established racial equity as a core principle of the Board of Commissioners. And in addition to making that statement, once again, being action oriented, it provides 4 concrete policy areas that we intend to work through for the years to come. And on the heels of that, towards the end of last year, county administration established within the Board of Commissioners an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and hired the county's first chief economic equity officer. And that chief of economic equity, diversity, and inclusion will be working to create greater opportunities throughout Franklin County as it relates to Franklin County as a $1.8 billion enterprise, creating additional contracting opportunities, providing a number of community outreach events so that different groups will know that Franklin County is committed to creating greater inclusion in all aspects of what we do and what we provide to the residents. When we talk about every resident every day, we want to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So we've been committed to this work and we plan to continue to do so. It's reflected in our goals as it relates to our construction projects as well. We want to have aspirational goals set for those construction projects and work and exceed those goals. On our current $360 million jail project, before that project started, the commissioners appointed a construction inclusion team. And that construction inclusion team is made up of community experts, community activists, different people with experience in this area. And as a result of that project, we went into it with a 12% aspirational goal. And at last count, we were over 28% for small and emerging business. And the same goes for our forensic science center. We exceeded our expectations related to inclusion there. And during the pandemic, we've established a number of programs aimed at creating greater opportunity in attacking structural racism. But those are just some of the few things that I wanted to highlight during this brief conversation.
Wow, that is like phenomenal, because that's a lot of work. I was in a conversation with an administrator in, I want to say Detroit. It was the city of Michigan. I want to say Detroit. And so I was talking about some of the things, I was bragging actually. I was bragging on some of the things that Franklin County has done in regards. And one of the questions he asked was, okay, one, I'm glad they declared it before everyone else did. But one of the things that people are doing, they're having a declaration without the meat and the muscle. And I was like, yes, but Franklin County declared it with the meat and the muscle. And they were very impressed when I talked about some of the things we've done, right? Because not only declaring Juneteenth as a countywide holiday, paid holiday, not only the efforts that you're talking about, when you're talking about we put tangible, actionable steps, but you put money behind it, because you're like, we're going to create the innovation lab that's going to tackle poverty with the focus on race and all that acknowledgement. Can you talk a little bit more about that unique initiative, please?
Yes, that was also one of the recommendations that came out of the Rise Together Poverty Blueprint. Set up an innovation council, and we want that innovation center to think bold and think in an innovative fashion. And while we've been busy with a number of different initiatives in the health and human services space, with a focus on all the things I outlined, we want this innovation center to really be more flexible, more resilient, able to act in a more aggressive fashion than even we can within the structure of county government. So we're in the process of finding an executive director to lead that effort. And it's going to eventually be a 501c3. We got that process underway. And it will be something that can take on transformational efforts. Like things like have been big issues for quite some time, like the lack of economic mobility due to the way, for example, what's known as the benefits cliff impact individuals that if they leave the structure of public assistance and they get that first job and it's just enough to take them over the edge, and they lose the value of childcare, they lose the value of medical assistance, they lose the value of a lot of those wraparound services, and they create tough choices. So if you can come up with a transitional period and use funding to close that gap, and then that individual gets that second promotion, that benefits cliff impact minimizes.
I'm sorry, I have to remember to unmute. Oh, okay. So I know you're at a conference and I know you're pressed for time. And I just want to thank you so much for being able to join us today and share those innovations, because they're very unique and they're transformative, like you said, and they have the ability to impact lives and communities in a positive way, where we're changing some of the systemic issues, right? I don't really talk about generational poverty. I don't like when people use that term. It's systemic. It's not so much generational, right? And when you're attacking it from that point, it's just so wonderful, and I'm so glad to hear that. So Is there anything else you would like to share with the audience before you leave and return back to representing us well at the conference?
No, the only closing point I would like to make is with government, you want to share the innovations and you want to share the best practices. I'm short on time, but I would like anyone that's interested also look at the work that we're doing with our family stabilization unit, which we started and we're working with justice involved youth in our domestic relations and juvenile court. And we're there meeting them where they are. We have a team of family stabilization unit specialists. And it is our goal under that program to catch them when they just having their first engagement and provide full wraparound support, and not only support them, but look to support their whole entire village, their immediate family and those folks around.
Wow, thank you so much. And that is such a great transition into Judge Monica Hawkins, who is joining us today, who is one of the phenomenal judges of our juvenile court, who is one of the people who institute what you're just talking about. And it's so great to have you today. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes off of the bench to join us. And as Administrator Wilson has just introduced, can you talk us just a little bit about some of that transformative change that juvenile court has introduced and some of the intent behind it and exactly where we're hoping that it'll go?
Yes, and Mr. Wilson stole some of my thunder with the Family Stabilization Unit, and they just were recognized and received an award for that transformation, that program, the initiative, and hopefully that'll be a forerunner for all the counties to take advantage of and see something igniting like fire helping families. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Monica Hawkins, and I am a judge on the Domestic Relations and Juvenile Court. I've been on the bench for 3 years now, and I'm just here to talk about some of the issues that I see plaguing our community and our systems with regards to our children. Now, all of us on here are educated people. We're social workers, we're doctors, we're CEOs, we're division heads. So we know that we are inundated with research that shows that racism plagues our country and is basically in the core of our DNA. And just like diabetes or high blood pressure or cancer, if it's in your system and it's in your DNA, it's almost impossible to get out unless you root it out and you do some strategic surgery to remove the cancer or remove the problem, and healing it can begin. So the first thing is we have to acknowledge there's a problem, and there has been a problem, and there continues to be a problem until all parties and all players know and effectively do things to dismount the racism, the stereotypes, the things that plague people of the Black culture, diaspora, and all people of color. And I'll just try to keep it focused since I have a short period of time, because like Mr. Wilson, I can go on all day. But with regards to the number, just recently our court did a deep dive with our Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative because of the Columbus Police Department's cry for help from the courts because of the increase in juvenile delinquency and the juvenile violence. So they had called it Operation Game Over. And they were saying that they were done dealing with these juveniles, these delinquents, and they wanted to provide more serious consequences. So as a result of that, because we are a court and all of us have our own duties and all of us have to stay in our own lanes and do our job, and while we understand and respect the police for what they do in the courts or in the legislature, all of us have our own avenue and area to stay in. Well, we did a deep dive and we found out that of all of our children, 603 kids in 2020 that were in our juvenile detention center, 505 were Black. And of the 586 kids that came to our reception center, 425 were Black youth. So our kids disproportionately in all of our dives and all of our extensive studies shows that Black and brown youth are incarcerated or placed in placement at a far disproportionate rate as white or Caucasian children or Asian. And that's a problem. And when we look across the spectrum, the crimes don't change. the types of crimes, the types of delinquencies, the status offenses. Nothing changes except for who's incarcerated and who's not. And we know in our adult system that happens as well, and that it disproportionately poor people and Black people, and it's normally poor Black people, are always incarcerated at a higher rate and placed in care and custody of children's services or courts, or the Department of Youth Services, at a significantly higher rate. And our court has acknowledged that, and hopefully through the changes that have come place since I've been on the bench, I hope that we're able to stop some of the insidious racism and discrimination that takes place, that plagues our system, and stop some of this generational curse that plagues our community. And because a lot of us know at the end of the day, outside of racism is poverty. And unless you give people an opportunity to make a decent living, to have decent wages, to raise their family, to put a roof over their head, have a car, put gas in their car, pay their utilities, buy their children school supplies and school shoes, they're going to go in an alternative route to do it. It's a survival mechanism. They are going to do whatever they need to do to feed and protect their family. And whether it's a legitimate means or illegitimate means, they all have the same goals that all of us have on this platform, is to provide for their family. And it's us as a community to put those systems in place to help people acquire a meaningful life. It's a shame that a billionaire can send himself to space and start talking about carrying people there like a bus, but then we have children, droves of people, kids who don't eat on a daily basis and don't have that daily 3 square meals a day. And until we put action behind our words, it's never going to change. But I am a change agent, as I believe all of you are here on this platform. And I have to believe that before the light, you have to go through the dark. And I believe that we can make that change. And justice grinds so ever slowly. And it's frustrating. Today I had a frustrating day, and it makes me even more conscientious of this is a fight and this is a struggle, and we have to elicit the help of not only us, but our white counterparts, Jewish counterparts, people with money, people in influential places, to right the wrongs that have been done, to ask for the change, to ask for the legislation, to impact our generation, because we're only as successful as we are as a community. None of us can move to the suburbs and escape crime. Crime is like a virus, it spreads. So I don't care. It just amazes me when you watch on the news and something happens in some suburb or some small area or town or township, and say, we never thought that would happen in our neighborhood. We never thought that would happen in our community. We never thought we had that kind of problem. It's everywhere. You can't stop it. Crime, drugs, and they went just in the crack epidemic when I was a caseworker. And, we would see men with car seats, white men, white affluent people come to the ghettos and buy drugs and take it back to the suburbs. You can't contain it. So I know I can go on and on and on. So what I'll try to do is cut it short and just talk about the initiatives that we have made here as a court. One, we're trying to change the whole mindset of incarcerating children, labeling them delinquent, calling them bad kids. And we have changed our platform, and we've even transformed our probation department from probation, because that's an adult negative term, that kids go on probation or parole. And we have what we call the Juvenile Court Enrichment Services, where we try to provide collaborative services, working with the family as a whole. And our family stabilization unit is a part of that, where we try to meet people where they are, one-stop shop where people can come and get all their needs met, and we service the whole family. Because it's not just one person, it's the whole family that's aching and ailing and they help. So I thank Mr. Wilson and the commissioners for doing a phenomenal job in providing that, and we have that here in our court. Our whole mindset now in our juvenile court intervention services is to, again, provide and collaborate with the communities at hand to provide family holistic help and services to thwart the discrimination, to thwart the delinquent behavior, and help these kids acquire education, job skills, some kind of attribute, so they don't have to resort to crime or violence or gang activity. Our juvenile detention alternative initiative, I hate these acronyms, but that's what we've called our juvenile detention center, because again, juvenile detention center has a negative connotation. So we are trying to change and think outside the box and have people think of these children as youth. They are not criminals. There's always been statistics, and the Supreme Court has already said they have the different mindset, and we have to treat our juveniles differently. So we have to change our diaphragm and our paradigm to how we deal with these children. So that's what we've done, and we've even changed our probation department. We have our YES program, the Youth Education and Intervention Program, which again, we're trying to provide services to help deal with the children where they are. It's a long way coming. These are new programs that are in place, and we're trying to be in line with the Casey Foundation because we believe working with families in their communities far outseed having them separated from their families and placed in incarceration and just graduate to the next step. COVID has impacted us a lot because a lot of things have been put on the back burner. So hopefully it won't be just the talk, it'll be the walk. I'm committed to this court. I believe I'm here for a purpose, and I am doing what I can to change the dynamics around here. And it won't happen overnight. And I welcome anytime. I have an open door policy, and Mr. Lunsford and Ms. Martin know how to get in contact with me. And, you know, we just have to be the change agent, all of us together, and arm in arm, locking arms like the civil rights movement, and demanding change for our children because they are our future. And the way things are looking, if we don't do something, all of us have something to be accountable to. And somebody to be accountable.
Thank you so much, Your Honor. You are fabulous, and the work you're doing is so influential, so inspirational. Thank you so much also for talking about the role of the importance of collaboration, not only with the family, but other departments and other agencies, and then also talking about the role of legislation. It's so important. A lot of times with social workers, we don't like to talk about policy and legislation, but it drives everything we do. We're married to it, and so we have to know the importance of that and the impact. So thank you so much for your time. I know you have a busy docket this afternoon. Thank you for your time. We so appreciate you joining us. And just a reminder for those who are watching us on YouTube, those who are present, feel free to put a question in the chat if you have it. Hopefully we get to it. If not, we'll leave you contact to be able to get in contact with us further if you have more, if we didn't get to your question.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody.
Thank you.
And so now we are going to transition a little towards panel style. And so we have Mr. Wilson and Ms. Hayes and Ms. Martin and Dr. Crutchfield. And we're going to talk a little bit about what does all this mean, right? All these things that Administrator Wilson and Judge Hawkins talked about, what does it mean when you unpack it and put it in the specific things? So, Jandel, now that we can start the panel discussion, we've talked so much about eliminating racism, promoting smart decarceration, and achieving equal opportunity and justice. What exactly, from your academic perspective, can you break that down for us? What does that mean? Because we're watching and we're like, wait a minute, we think we get it. What does it mean?
Well, I really appreciate what the panelists so far and Judge Hawkins talked about, and you mentioned in terms of collaboration. So we already know the United States is the world leader in incarceration, right? If you're speaking of promote smart decarceration. So there's an expansion of the criminal justice system, mass incarceration, and that really started in the 1980s. And so there's been a social justice crisis, right? The over-incarceration of some of the most marginalized people. And so I think what it means is just there's a challenge, a really immense challenge to rethink. And so I think it was perfect that Mr. Wilson and Judge Hawkins went before me, because that is exactly what they're doing. They are trying to rethink and transform the system in a way that will alleviate racial and economic disparities that they mentioned. We need to try to reduce the over-reliance, right, on incarceration as a means of public safety, and instead try to promote public safety, if that makes sense. So reducing the over-reliance on incarceration as a means to promote public safety, but just do the public safety aspect of it. And so what the academic, institutional knowledge is trying to create is to try to propose more of a proactive transdisciplinary, right? So that cross-cutting collaborative feature where different sectors, right, in criminal justice, in social work, in education, in health, right, are using empirically driven, smart ways to approach and transform the criminal justice system. And so we think social work, of course, is qualified to lead that effort. Given our history of reform, we do have an ethical commitment to social justice, trying to be more of a leader and dealing with some of the structural issues. And I think, Dr. Lunsford, you used the word systemic, right? So looking at the structural interventions to try to deal with this complex problem. So I think the idea in academia is to try to get out of our silos in these different sectors and to really cross disciplines to create this rational response, right, of what needs to happen. And so that's what I think of in terms of the academy, in terms of what promote smart decarceration refers to, right? And so I love that we have panelists that are able to kind of walk that out and give that legs and meat. And so I think in terms of achieving equal opportunity and justice, the real issue is access, right? And Mr. Wilson talked greatly about that transition. I think he called it the benefits cliff, right? So where the access to these opportunities for employment, for affordable housing, quality education is still evasive to many Americans based on, again, racism, right? Past prejudice, present bias, and stigmatization. So I think the social marginalization has led many of us in the United States to just ignore all of these things that exist in communities. And so it continues to foster inequality. And so I think as a goal in the research that's happening is to try to address racial and social injustices, to try to deconstruct some of the stereotypes, as in renaming things, right? So yes program versus probation, trying to dismantle inequality, exposing unfair practices. I think that is a big part of what we're trying to do with research, is really an exposure of what is unfair that might then lead to being able to participate fully, socially, civically, economically, politically, for groups that have been historically excluded. And I forget where I hear that, right? The difference between, marginalized, but historically excluded. And so I think there's been a lot of things, a lot of plans to try to address some of that social stigma in research, trying to raise awareness of what contributes to inequity, getting rid of and reducing these false narratives about groups that are stigmatized, trying to develop and work with local, state, federal policymakers to promote equitable access. And I think trying to monitor some things. I've been involved with a few efforts to try to hold folks accountable. And so this deep dive that Judge Hawkins mentioned, being able to do that on a regular basis. So forming networks of how we can keep track of what efforts are happening to eliminate, exclusionary, discriminatory practices, but what actually people are doing about it. So that kind of is it in a nutshell. And I think the big takeaway is just trying to bring folks together across disciplines that you may not necessarily think would be involved in this work. So hopefully I answered your question. I just started talking.
Absolutely. I love it. Absolutely love it. Especially because that's the whole thing, right? We learn to translate all that research into practice. We get those evidence-based that you guys research and talk about and share with us. And how do we translate that into practice, right? So Roger, I'm coming to you because Dr. Crutchfield mentioned it, right? We heavily incarcerate in the United States. United States is 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's incarcerated population. There are over 1.5 million people incarcerated in the United States when you're talking about the local jails, state prisons, and federal prisons. But then when you get into even juvenile detention centers and tribal centers and military detainments and all the other different detainments, we're talking about 2.3 million people out of 380 plus million people in the United States, right? So I'm coming to you because you have an impressive, extensive career that includes prisons and jails and probation and parole and all this, that African Americans constitute 40% of the parole population, 30% of the probation population, but yet only 13% of the US population. So can you tell us a little bit from your experiences and leading organizations and all this other kind of stuff about Why do you think it's necessary for us to have this decarceration movement in our society? What have you seen as the impact of mass incarceration from your perspective with all of this going on? You're on mute.
All right, I apologize for that. I have 3 screens going, and sometimes I don't even know where my pointer is. First and foremost, I think we need to look at the collateral consequences of mass incarceration and how they impact communities and the voids that they leave and the kinds of things that happen as a result of those voids. One of the things that I've seen and only come to recently realize is the proliferation of detachment disorder that we see inside our institutions and a lack of empathy in some of our inmate population because they grew up in families where incarceration was prevalent and they didn't form bonds. And so that kind of leads them to a lifetime of social disorganization and the inability to form meaningful relationships and in groups and things like that. Some of the other issues with regard to mass incarceration that has kind of gotten the attention of politicians is the tremendous costs associated with it. Longer drug sentences has led to an aging population, which leads to the biggest cost in corrections is healthcare. We pay a tremendous amount for folks to receive healthcare in our institutions, heart surgeries, eye transplants, and those types of things. And I was just in one of our institutions last week, and we have an inmate there who's 97 years old. And so when we talk about decarceration, we need only look back at recent history with the coronavirus pandemic. And we came up with creative ways to identify inmates who don't need to be there. And I think our prison population dropped by about 5,000 or 6,000. The jail population dropped by about 7,000 just in the past year because of strategies that we employed because we had to as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And so we know we can do it. We just have to get it done.
Wow, those are great points. Those are absolutely great points because, like you said, Corona showed us we have new ways of doing things, and incarceration doesn't have to be the answer. So, Crystal, I'm moving my way over to you because I know with specialty courts, those are unique ideas of decarceration. How do we use those ideas? And what is that role of probation and parole in specialty courts in the decarceration movement?
Specialty courts actually are an excellent example of interdisciplinary collaboration. So each docket, in addition to the judge, there's a dedicated probation officer, prosecutor, public defender, coordinators, and then we have a treatment team. So we have licensed counselors, social workers from our partner agencies that we also work with. And so these are the people who each week we staff these cases, do referrals, look at resources, look at services, and even part of the grants. I mean, there's so many. So even just how those things even come about needs to have all those people from different agencies. And so part of our certification that's also coming up is that we're going to have to also include law enforcement. We're going to be including child welfare workers on that as well. And so looking at how we can help the whole family. So not just that person, but looking at their needs. And this all really kind of came about because there's a correlation between mental health, substance abuse, trauma, and criminal justice. So how we normally dealt with people that had issues, we would push them away, we'd incarcerate them, or we would gather all this information in pre-sentence investigations and then not do anything of it. And then we would find out that there was a history of, there's abuse, there's, placements in and out of foster care. There were all these, parents that had substance abuse, mental health, and we would gather this information and then not do anything with it. And then we would just do what we would normally do. Okay, you're on probation for, 2 years. And then we would send them to counseling and not really work with that agency to make sure that it was the type of counseling they needed. And so I was really excited when we started talking about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how that impacts people, how that impacts people's health, their ability to get along with people, to hold a job, to, be in school, all those other things. And so looking at that role of trauma, and now we're looking at that and providing people with, real services to meet those needs, in addition to understanding that they also have housing issues. They also have, financial and employment. When you have a record, you can't find a job. So we're working with agencies that provide that second chance housing, second chance employment. So knowing that our people have, records or whatever up front, they're willing to help them to get a job so they can get the skills. Because once you have a job, it's easier to find a better job. And so looking at all of those things. So that's kind of with my career, as a PO, I worked with the families, but it was more of an individual level. But now, working with specialty courts and having worked on both sides of that, this is the perfect marriage for me of everything that I want to do, and kind of working with people in the system to really meet those needs. Because once you meet those needs and you treat those needs and you help a veteran who's having difficulty readjusting after being deployed and seeing all the things that they see, and then they come back home, and then we just expect them to go to the movies and hang out and do regular things, and not having that support. So being able to provide those services to meet people where they are, and so they can move beyond the system.
Wow, that's admirable. You said a lot in a little, but just so much. And you hit the nail on the head on the whole purpose of the whole webinar. So thank you so very much. And we talked about that. And then we have a question in the Q&A that goes to the next panelist that we were going to, because she wants to talk about structural issues in the school system and how social workers can influence, right? And so we go to Felicia Hayes, and that was one of the things we wanted to talk about. We see that not everyone who has a problem adjusting in school will be a part of the criminal justice system, but we see a lot of people in the criminal justice system who had a problem adjusting to school, right? And so I know you've seen some of the unique things as a probation officer and working with the schools and things like this. And can you talk a little bit more about that intersectionality with education in the criminal justice system and some of the unique things and initiatives going on in Franklin County that are meant to, eliminate racism and help everyone achieve equal opportunity and justice?
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, so the school system, I am currently working with the school system to focus on reducing recidivism, but also increasing their education. So the initiative came out of Title I, Part D, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, what most people know as the No Child Left Behind Act. So through the years, it changes. And now that we're under the Biden administration, we're also looking for some new changes to occur as well. But essentially what this Title I, Part D focuses on is helping children who are neglected, delinquent, and at risk. And there are federal funding that goes to teaching, identifying students who have those intersectionality concerns. Although it's an education grant, we're looking at the whole picture. We're focusing on the wraparound services. We're focusing on, okay, well, how are we going to address the delinquency here? How are we going to address the educational here? How are we going to address the mental health or substance use, whatever is going on, and we treat the family as a whole. So we're trying to do an innovative thing of incorporating a family, the village, restructuring the family, teaching them basic skills, teaching them what value education bring to them as a person and as a community, and how we can move forward. Thus, when we're educated, we can eliminate some of these racial barriers, especially in school, because I believe some of our kids don't, the systematic, I don't know how, I'm trying to be appropriate, the systematic breakdown of people of color, our Black students mainly, especially our Black males, what they're stigmatized as, especially if they know that they've been involved in the criminal justice system. Immediately, oh, that is a bad kid. No, that child needs help just like any other child. And with the lack of education, I don't think our students can identify that, when they're being treated different by race, by class, by their education, their education abilities, especially if they're disabled. It's easier to push a disabled Black male child under the system because he's harder to work with. So those are the things that I'm trying to change and working with the community. And I'm also trying to increase family involvement and empowering our families. I work with a variety of community service agencies that will be providing support. I will make sure that, that the juveniles, when they're in I don't want to say incarcerated, but when they're in the juvenile intervention center, to make sure they're still receiving those education services. And when they come out, everything is linked to where they need to be. Make sure they get the credits for the classes that they've done, and they're not, and that's one of the frustrating things for a lot of our kids, not receiving the credit for the work that they did. So we want to make sure we do that. We want to make sure that we provide that support. We want to make sure that they have a mentor, or if they need, assistance with TANF, whatever they need, we're trying to wrap that up. So this is a pilot program, so we'll see what happens in the near future.
Wow, that's exciting. It really is reinvigorating. And I know there's so much more we could talk about. And I know there's so many more questions. I don't see anything else in the Q&A, but I know there's so much more. And if each panelist could maybe even just drop in the chat a way people could contact you if they have further questions, because I know there's so much more to know, so much more to discuss. May have questions, maybe thinking about trying to implement some of the things in your own county or jurisdictions. So I want to thank each panelist so much for being here. Yes, there's a whole bunch of more questions we could ask, but I want to make sure that we give you thanks and give you your props for taking time out of your schedule, as well as being able to have time to get the CEU link in, because most importantly, I know everybody wants to get their CEUs and being able to do all that. So let's see, are you getting any interest from other juvenile centers across the nation in the pilot program? This problem is nationwide. I think that's either Jen Hawkins or
yes, I would love to have any type of juvenile centers. Right now, I'm just working with Franklin County. I have been in contact with other state agencies, education agencies, to see how they're addressing this concern, because like I said, it's a federal grant, so it's nationwide. So there is an issue with this. But yes, I am looking at other institutions and residential programs, halfway houses, because we serviced children up to 21, so they could be incarcerated in our rehabilitative centers or our county jails. So yes, I am looking to make some changes. So we'll see. We'll stay prayerful.
And I can say, unfortunately, it seems like a lot of places and organizations work in silos, and a lot of information is not shared or corroborated, or everybody seems like they want to keep their stuff close to their vest. And I'm not saying everybody, so I don't like to make generalizations like everyone else, but what I notice is there's a lot of silos, and there's not a coordination of information being disseminated. We do get a lot of information as far as pamphlets, data sharing. We get bulletins, we get updates from the Supreme Court, Ohio Supreme Court, and they give us a wealth of information. But hopefully we can start connecting with counties, contiguous counties, and then from there, state to state. That's some of the problem too, also with everybody having their own community they work in, is expanding it statewide, because it is a nationwide problem. And I don't know anyone has the answer to it, but we can just all work together and just, I'm optimistic, and I'm here and available, and I contact other judges out of state and out of county for help and ask questions. And that's all we can do, is just work in my backyard and keep my backyard clean. So I try to do that. And I just want to leave with people, as far as the educational point, and leave this with people. Most of the kids that come on my caseload, where we're looking to relinquish jurisdiction to the adult system, I can tell you on my caseload, 90% of them haven't finished the 8th grade. I've even had some say they haven't completed the 6th grade. It is beyond my whole concept as an adult, why somebody would not finish the 6th grade. I just think about what I was doing in the 6th grade, and for somebody not to go to school, there's an underlying deep-seated issue, and it doesn't lie with the child. So it's humbling.
Thank you. And that's such a great way to close us out. And thank you so much for talking about working together, optimism, and keep on going, because social workers, we keep trucking, we keep going, and one day we'll just see the fruits of our labor. And so I want to thank you very much, and I want to turn this back to Dr. Crutchfield so she can close us out and tell us about future webinars.
Yes, so I'm just very impressed, and I said at the beginning I was looking forward to hearing, and you guys did not disappoint. And so this is the exciting part of the work I do, right? Because you guys are legs out there that are actually getting these things done. And so thank you again for being with us. I'm just quickly going to share my screen for those of you guys out in the audience. Remember, we had our launch 2 weeks ago. So this is our second part of the series. The third will be on August the 10th. And so you'll see a link. We may already have one. I don't know if we do, for the next one to be able to register. But there definitely will be some publicizing of that, definitely on the Grand Challenge website. So you can register again. We'll be talking about eliminating racism in economics in particular, and how to reduce extreme economic inequality and build financial capability and assets for all. And so you can see once a month through December, we'll be looking at all of these grand challenges. So we hope many of you who joined today can come back to join us. We'll have a new slate of speakers for next time, but people that are out there doing this good work. And so just want to thank again the UTA School of Social Work for hosting. And so we do see in the chats the register for part 3. You can already do that. Thank you again for Dr. Luntz for being the spearhead, for Dr. Blossman for his support as well, in the grand challenges of social work. And so let's get to it, right?
And one more thing about the NASWCUs, please.
Go ahead. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, don't forget, everyone. It's in the link.
So
the link is in the
so,
chat. Make sure you get on there to get your CEUs.
Yeah. So hopefully it's probably posted on YouTube as well. If you viewed it, you do have to complete a form to get those free CEUs. So let's do that. Thanks so much, Joanne. Thanks, everybody. Clap to you.